Welcome back to What's on My Needles, and this is part 2 of working on my mitered sweater or mitered jacket. I believe I'm labeling them as mitered jacket. So the first part was starting on the bottom edge and working up, and last time I got to the start of the armholes. So it was to right there on that sweater. And so this time I'm making the back of the armhole and then working up again towards that center back of the neck or center bottom of the neck, and then adding the sleeves. So hopefully it'll be done this video. Numbers wise, I am well over halfway through the sweater, so it should be able to be done in this video. So let me get set up and I'll show you what's going on. So last time I was binding off the armholes, and in between the last video and this one I have done the underarm seam. And editing the last one, I remembered that I had pointed out that I'd put a stitch marker on this miter line. I actually took that marker out after a couple rounds or a couple rows because I ended up not needing it as much as I thought I would. Okay, so detangling my yarn a little bit, and it got pulled a little bit, so it's a little tight on the needles right now. So I'm going to pull everything up and ready, and I'm going to do a cable cast on to make some more stitches. So this is actually a wrong side row, so I'd finish the row with the needles that way. So I flipped around. I'm going to insert my needle through the front because that's how I knit. And I'm going to try really hard not to split the yarn. Though I will say with this yarn, that is incredibly hard. So there's one. So insert my needle as if to knit. Again, for me, for most of you, it'll actually be insert through the back. Yarn over, pull through, and place on the needle. Some people choose to do a turn with the loop, some people don't. I'm choosing not to for this project. And this is actually my standard cast on rather than the long tail cast on. But I am just adding stitches. And I'll continue like that all the way until I get the 40 stitches back that I had. And then the last stitch will actually be right in that slip stitch so that I can have a shoulder seam that I don't have to sew up later. So I will be back in a little bit. So I am at the point, or almost to the shoulder seam, so that you guys can see how that works. So I'm going to go ahead and knit all the way up to that last stitch. I'm going to slip the stitch over, and then I'm going to do a pick up and knit. So I'm putting my needle in that little in the V of the slipped edge stitch, pulling up a loop, then yarning over, or then pulling the slip stitch back over. So what that's doing on this side is it's creating a line of double V's, but on the right side, which is this side, it's the only reason you can see that it's a seam is because of the color difference between the two. There's a slight jog in the knitting, but most people don't actually notice it. So I'm going to keep going for a while, and I will be back at the next step. And here we are to the next step. So I've stopped a couple stitches short of the shoulder seam, but I have gone the 20 rows that shoulder seam is going to need to be. So I'm going to go ahead and knit all the way to that last stitch. And then up until now, I've been slipping that stitch and working through the previous slip stitch. And this time I'm actually just going to work it normally. So I'm going to just go ahead and knit. So that's ending the shoulder seam and starting on the back of the neck. And that's actually as the next little step. From here on out, it's just working back and forth like I've been doing this whole time. I am now under 100 stitches rather than the 400 that I started with. So it's not going to take that much longer to get there. And it's just going to be a little finish off right around there. So I will be back when it's time for that. I will say this is how much yarn is left right now of that first ball. I'm confident that I'll have enough to finish just because it's not shrinking that quickly. But just so you guys understand how the yarn has been changing colors. It started off with 4 strands of black and then went to 1 strand of dark purple, and it moved through, and now I've got 3 strands of cream and 1 strand of light purple. So that's how it's doing this nice ombre effect all the way through. Now normally I'm not a fan of having knots in my yarn, even if they come from the manufacturer that way. I will normally take them out and lay the 2 strands next to each other and then weave them in at the end. But because this is a 4-strand, because they're not twisted together, and because it's 1 strand at a time that's changing, I chose to leave the knots in place in this piece. So I will be back in a little bit to show you the very end of the body of the sweater, and then it'll be on to sleeves. So be back in a minute. So I have done exactly what I said. So I've gone around once doing a pickup and knit, and then I did a purl round. And now I'm working on the sleeve head or sleeve cap. I have stitch markers showing me where top center of the sleeve head is. I've pulled off the underarm stitches so that my circular needle does not in fact get too small, the stitches don't get too small for my circular needle. I currently do not have my 16-inch at my disposal, so I will be doing most of the sleeve on double points, but that will be later. So, I'm going to go ahead and knit the very top of the sleeve head, and then I'm going to wrap. So, slip the stitch, pull the yarn to the front, slip it back, and flip the work. And I'm going to be repeating that basic idea all the way around. But after this first row, I'm going to be doing some decreases. And because I'm doing this sweater essentially in garter stitch, there are some interesting upsides. So I'm first going to say what the downside is. The downside is the fact that garter stitch takes a lot of yarn. It's just a lot of material to get into the work. The upside, and I'm not sure how well this camera and this lighting are going to show this. You can't see that wrap. So I don't have to hide it. I can just leave it as is, which is great. So not only am I doing short rows to make the top of the sleeve longer so that it makes that corner essentially around my shoulder, but I'm also doing this as a way to decrease the circumference or the number of stitches around my sleeve. So now I have to remember which way that stitches. So it's going to be a knit 2 together. Actually, sorry. Not quite right. So I could hide the wrap if I choose to. And I think on this one I will choose to, just so you can see. In the final product it won't be obvious one way or the other. So that was just pick up the wrap and slide it to the wrong side and knit. And then I'm knitting 2 together. And I'm wrapping again. And I'm going to go back and forth doing that over and over and over again until I am all the way down to here. At that point, I should have 72 stitches. I will be replacing the stitch markers as I go to mark the new 10s again as I go. Currently they're in 10s just so that I know that I'm staying even, and then eventually they will be to mark that I have the correct number of stitches in here. So I will be back in a little bit just to show you how this looks. So be back. So after all the short rows are done, this is how much of a sleeve cap I have. So this one's actually still a pretty shallow sleeve cap. I don't tend to make really deep sleeve caps, but what that would do is make a much straighter sleeve. This is going to be more at an angle, so that's the angle of this one. But now I'm just going to go round and round and round and round, knit a row, purl a row, all the way around until I either have the sleeve at the length that I want, or I'm out of black yarn, because I'm not going to go all the way into the purple. I'm going to leave these at black. So I'm hoping to get right around elbow length on me. So here is the final product of the sweater. So it is a little on the baggy side on me, but that was also the intent. It is super lightweight, like it's not warm at all. So this is going to be perfect for just cutting the breeze over during the spring and the summer. I do have buttonholes on this and no buttons yet, and it will only button down to there, so below about my bust line it will still be completely open even if I want to button it up. But for the most part it will actually be worn just open. So this is the end of this one. You guys can see the style line of that miter going all the way up and around and under the armpit. As I said before, I did only make the sleeves down to my elbows. I feel like that's flattering on me. So yeah, I will see you next time for a new project. Bye!